Hello, this is Nausicaa. Just call me Cameron, whatever. Don't call me Nausicaa, it's kind of like weird. And I'm here with Simon, most notably known as SipeNav. And I am currently eating some chocolate cake kind of thing. Don't know
Nice.
what it really is, but it's got chocolate, it's tasty, and it's like you need a good dessert when you're watching the OPL, honestly. Because, well, what can we really say about this week? Another week of the OPL went through all very disappointing games where
Ooh.
you watch them and you slowly come to a realization because during the split, like especially this like the end of spring and the start of summer, you're just like, we've got plenty of time to build up for worlds. Like, one team will really get strong and go ahead. And last year that was like Mammoth. Mammoth really looked on that trajectory to actually contest. That was a lie. And now I don't have that feeling about this year. I look at all the teams and I'll be like, oh god, which one are we sending to Worlds that's just going to get absolutely aced? Because you also have to take into account the amount of talent that has left the scene that also haven't necessarily looked good outside. Because it's like Triple left as well, and he was like on FlyQuest Academy, but I heard that FlyQuest Academy team did like nothing. But like Academy teams in general are a bit like, a bit
Yeah.
like no one really cares about them and they're pretty abused. Like they don't really care, they just sub people in and out depending on how the team's doing. Think of the Mortal situation. We've got
God.
Lost in TSM, I think, and he's
Yeah.
doing pretty well. Like TSM is considered one of the better Academy teams. FBI I think is having like a huge field day. King's currently quarantined and fucking jailed in OCE and can't even play for C9 even after playing well in C9. Fudge is on C9 and he's doing well, but to be fair, it is Academy. But I would like to see Fudge in the LCS. One thing I was surprised, we're kind of going a bit off topic from the actual games that I do want to talk about it, is Ryoma, who has had a very questionable split, especially considering the strength for the mid laner he was coming into the split, because he was kind of like the big fish in the small pond in OS. He was literally just destroying everyone in lane. And like you ask like other people, like I was watching Claire's stream and someone asked him the question like, oh, do you think Ryoma actually deserved to go to NA? Like, and he was just like, well, I don't know, I can't really contest that because like Ryoma was just someone different, like something on the lines of that, was just like Ryoma just shouldn't be an OS anymore, realistically. Like he was just that good. But then when he came to NA, which NA does have like a lot of like good mid laners, like he's going up against Jensen, he's going up against Jizuke, he's going up against Niski. Like these aren't your Clairs and Shocks, these are the top caliber mid laners that have had like big worlds runs as well. So it's kind of like hard to expect Ryoma to have like a great performance in there, but I think a lot of people are really gunning for it, and it's kind of sad to not see it happen.
Yeah, I think like when Roma was sent over to NA, he also wasn't as big as you remember him to be. Like because remember he was like one of the top three. I think there was three people really like the top mids. There was Claire and Triple and Ryoma, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And Ryoma was the most volatile out of all of them because Triple was like rock solid, wouldn't like he would be like in a losing matchup and not lose it. Whereas like Claire was like the savior, he would make the big plays when it really mattered. But Ryoma would like had the most variety of performances, and so that's why I think it's a bit unfair to like say, oh yeah, you're in the LCS now, you just do an amazing performance, because he still had that young side to him, so he still had a bit to grow into NA.
I think as well as like FBI didn't really have that kind of like split as well that Ryoma did. Like FBI kind of went into the LCS and actually just performed, regardless of his supports, situation.
Oh man,
Like, because he's been like laning with like Huhi. Like, how do you lane with Huhi support? I'm still surprised that he's still in the fucking LCS when you've got like supports like Diamond, who's playing in academy that even I watch the VODs of, like to learn on. Like the guy's actually nuts. So pretty crazy that who he's playing in the LCS, but they're still winning. And FBI, like every game you watch of GGS, like it's really hard to see FBI making a mistake. And I think FBI was definitely the best talent we sent out of OS. Like,
it's just unfortunate that they have to play against all the Europeans, you know? Like,
yeah,
because it's really not about like, oh yeah, can OS compare with NA? It's no, can OS compare with like other major regions in terms of imports?
Yeah, because it's like they're importing like the Koreans, like
yeah,
you may be going to NA, but you may have to lane against the imported Korean the world champion JJ.
I can't wait until LCS finally changes its title to like All Stars Retirement League, and really can really fulfill its destiny.
Let's be real, NA does have a future. They're just afraid of putting like any work into their talent. And the thing is, like with NA, they always say they're investing in their talent, which is just such a load of shit. Because they put people like Speaker and Saligo up into the like real leagues, and they get shit on, and then it's like, oh, our rookies fucking suck. But there's these like really insane rookies that are playing. Like Tactical and Johnson are really good ADs, and they've only just gotten a spot. Like Tactical is currently on a 10-2 team, and he's a rookie. Like obviously he has pretty nuts players around him. Like I think I could AD pretty well with Core JJ as my support. But regardless, I think these guys are good. And they're just looking for excuses so they can just reuse the same old talent. Like, I don't want to see Froggen in the LCS anymore. Let's be real. Like, like he just does a okay job. Like he doesn't lose you games, but he also doesn't win you games. He doesn't really have that X factor that you should expect of like other players.
Yeah, you may as well get that okay job from a rookie and then build him bigger.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, with rookies, they're just, like, more willing to make, like, weird, aggressive plays, which is currently, like, I wouldn't say the meta, but if you looked at all the teams that were doing successful, especially, like, the current European and LPL teams, they're all based around being, like, making really aggressive, decisive plays around, like, really mechanically strong players. Like no one knew who Tian was until he just smurfed all over Worlds. Like the guy was a monster.
Oh yeah, he absolutely carried that team.
It's crazy actually watching the VODs. Have you ever like watched the videos of like? Because I like watching the videos of after Worlds. Because I remember before Worlds, people like in 2019, no one cared about FVX, and especially when they lost the first game, everyone downplayed it. And then you watch the Spice game and you just see Tian just 1v9 and you're like, holy shit.
Jesus.
Like, Tian is just absolutely insane. And it was the same with like the Shy in 2018 as well. Like, the Shy was just another species. He's not even human. But I wouldn't say so at the moment. If you saw his the mid-season Invitational Cup thingy that they did in Korea, where the Shy might have picked Lucian into Doran's Wukong and go 0-3.
Well, that's what happens when you pick Lucian.
Yeah, as someone that likes the Shy, that was really sad to watch. But enough of that. Let's actually talk about the EuroPL games. So first game we had was Chiefs versus Pentanet Gaming. Pretty clean win by the Chiefs. But I think this is more of an extension of just Pentanet's game style of like once a play goes wrong, they're just willing to stall out the game until they can find another opportunity. And they will just like slowly bleed. I think they do a good job of it most of the time, but I think as well as like it's a bit hard to watch because then you're just watching them slowly lose instead. Well, this strategy has worked for them and has gotten them wins against bad teams like Mammoth and stuff. Like I remember one game when Mammoth was really ahead and they just weren't really able to close it out because PGG played really well from behind and just, slowed down the game. So they got a lot of their wins with the Cassidy comp as well. Like, just playing it slow, just letting them... it's like a good idea. But this game, it didn't really work, and I think Chiefs is one of the harder teams to execute it against, especially once this Akali just got, 3 kills. It's so hard to play the side lane for any of these champions.
Oh yeah, and also they blind picked Kha'Zix just out of nowhere, and I think they relied too heavily on Pabu to like make stuff happen early, and as soon as you said it, they got that big fight around Herald, and Theon cleans up, and then they just Chiefs take over the game. Also, Draku had a solid game. Didn't look too bad on that Brom.
I mean, it's a really Draku champion, honestly. Like, if only it was like more of a blindable champion, we'd probably see him on it more often.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a good answer. Like, I think because they banned the Thresh, and then Rogue's like next second champion is like Nautilus if he has to blind on red side, which usually happens.
And it also helps out Theon because then he can run a carry, and it doesn't really ruin their team composition.
Yeah, it doesn't look as awkward. Because this is like, if you look at all the champions they're playing, it just looks like the most ideal composition you would want to draft for the Chiefs. Like, at least like, obviously, like maybe a Akali wouldn't be the first champion you think of at Theon, but it's like in a similar line and play style. And he can play it at a pretty good level, you know.
Yeah.
I think the Kha'Zix as well just got really set behind by that W cheese from Syndra. Like, it's like, you never expect it, but it's just always something you have to keep in mind as a jungler. Because it fucks you so hard. And I think that's just like, it can be a bit of autopilot, or just thinking that they won't go for it. Because like, it's a bit of a disrespectful thought process, because you can go like, oh, there's no way that Syndra will go for the play like this. Like, this is some, like, fucking silver donkey video shit, you know? It's not actually, like, a good play, but it is.
Yeah.
So,
you've
really,
always got to play to what the other team's going to do, because they're always going to try and screw you over. They're not playing to help you at all.
I don't really have much else to say about this game, apart from what I've just said.
No, I think on top of that, Bio played well. He was in a bit of an awkward situation for a lot of it because he was their front line when Hergot not like an ideal solo frontliner. But I think they just waited too long, and against good teams, you have to just like force plays. You can't always wait for an ideal situation. But that's all I had for that game.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to the next one, which was AV versus Mammoth. What do you have to say about this game from the offset?
Well, Violet played well. They had a bit of a rough start, if I remember correctly, for AV. Mammoth also had GDX in finally, which was interesting, and it looked weird because they blind picked the Rumble for mid, but then Silas top as a counter to Kennen. But then as soon as that mid game came around, AV just was so much cleaner in the fights. I think their composition was a lot better because they had Orianna, Kennen, Volibear, even Aphelios, and once it hit that mid game, they just looked a lot cleaner and then took control. And then, with Chaz winning, Violet winning, and Papyrus doing well, like, the game's kind of over at that point.
Yeah. Well, I think the weirdest thing is Chungi kind of like 1v9ing Mammoth wins and then being subbed out for this Rumble TF2 trick. Sorry, I swallowed something the wrong way. I've got a good point. All right. I'm going to say it now. Never mind. All right, I'm going to say it now. So, I've been negative on a couple of things about Mammoth, and I've been wrong on a couple of things. On some of those things, at least. Because at first, I criticised them kicking Sam and moving Liv to top lane, which I think overall was like they got Chungi in the mid lane, which was like good. It's like upgrade. The guy can like lane pretty well against the top mid laners, and Liv seems to just be performing better top lane. I didn't actually really expect Sam to just fall off as hard as he did. Like, it's pretty hard to see. Because, like, I thought Sam would have a really good time in Gravitas, but it really did not work out, and being subbed out for nobody after you were meant to be the fix for Gravitas just really fucked Gravitas over. So it's hard to say, but like I think Mammoth was perfectly right on that in hindsight. I don't really like this switch as well, especially when you're in the middle of the summer split. You're playing for a chance of playoffs now, and Chungi is kind of that X factor that has been getting you those wins, especially like his Ari is apparently like a must ban. It's like really ridiculous. Like he has these like, it's a weird champion pool that he plays into that is really hard for most mid laners to play into. And I think they were playing really well. And even in the games they were losing up until recently, like I was just like, okay, this is not that bad. I mean, like, there are still some problems in the team. Like, Lived, once he dies, he just dies and repeat. And Artek is like a really questionable support choice. I won't talk too much about support because I feel like people won't take my word for it, but I think his gameplay speaks for itself.
Definitely.
But I think overall I was happy with like the direction that Mammoth were heading. And then to sub in this GDX guy that didn't really look good in Academy either. Like on the Mammoth Academy roster, he played Rumble, and it wasn't like he was really having like a great performance as well. Like I wasn't watching this player and being like, this guy is just 1v9ing. Whereas like when you were watching Chungi on RMIT, it was like literally him surrounded by like 4 Pislo randoms and he was just 1v9ing. Like, so I want to question it a lot. And I don't want to be too harsh on it because like Mammoth's split is pretty much done at this point. Like they can do whatever they want with the team. You know, it's their call. But I think it's not ideal, especially if you keep Chungi in for more games and he has better performances. You just give him more career options. Him just being on the bench here is just really stunting his growth. And if they just keep in GDX for the whole split, GDX is not going to be on a team unless he just becomes like a 1v9 carry out of nowhere, which I highly doubt it. He's literally just been introduced to the OPL. He is never going to be picked as a mid laner over Chungi. So they should just have Chungi in to just improve like his chances of being on a better team in later split. Or be a Mammoth when Mammoth has money, you know? Either or. But yeah, it's just sad to see because I think Chungi really deserved the play time.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult seeing the switch this late in the season. So hopefully they know something we don't, and maybe GDX is smurfing in scrims, but until then, we'll see.
Yeah. But I think we can also talk about AV's pretty insane week if you look at it. Because they had been really down in the dumps. Like, we were constantly mentioning it. Like, oh, AV aren't really winning anymore. It's a bit yikes. And, like, they had some close games as well. Like, they had that really close one against Order that they were so damn close to winning. But then just lost it in the last fight. Even though Chaz was, like, trying his hardest to 1v9. And I think both the games that they played against Mammoth and Direwolves were just really clean from the AV roster. And I had my criticisms of Appy before, and I think he's just playing amazingly now. Like, it's just really, like, apparently whenever I say someone's, like, playing bad, first it was Order, now it's Appy, they just start smurfing. So, you know, I don't know, man. Like I'm happy that AV is back, but I'm kind of sad at the same time. It's just after I said that Appy was playing bad.
Well, that's part of the thing, right? Is so far over this split, every time we've talked up someone, they immediately fall off again. So I think I'm not too excited for AV because like I hope they can like turn it around for the playoffs and make a run for them, but it's just difficult. It's just I feel this was an up week for them, and they're not going to get through till the end of the split with full uptime. I think they'll have a bit of a drop, but I hope they can make it, but I don't think they will. I think it'll still be too back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. next game, all in all in court, wanting to skip this game. Say I. Just holy crap.
I have a couple of points actually.
Oh no!
No.
All right.
Okay,
Fine.
so-
Go.
So, Order actually looked really clean. Granted, it's expected in this particular game against Gravitas. But, and I really liked what Gravitas did in draft. Not the picks that they picked, but the decisions they made in the sense of they saved Jungle for counter pick, and then they picked the Silas, which is not super powerful. And then they didn't protect it early, so it got beaten by Sejuani.
The Bard first pick.
The Bard first pick also not great. Although I think Zed's the right idea for them, just in the sense of like you need to throw a curveball, and you can't play standard.
Yeah, Seaman has to be the curveball, but as well as like Seaman's just not really like playing at Seaman levels. Like
no, I think he's having a rest for the rest of the split.
Yeah, he doesn't care about OPL anymore. But
I liked the Scion out of bans. That was really nice to round out their comp because they had the Bard. And so I think like it started with a good or like the right direction, but like as soon as they lost that level 1, only just took control, and that was about it. And they couldn't make a comeback, unfortunately, because their big playmaker is the one who's behind, which is a bit sad.
Yeah. All right, cool. That's that.
Nice.
Next game, Dark Wolves vs Legacy. They almost had him. It was actually like a good game from Dark Wolves, like especially because Dark Wolves are definitely in the down at the moment. This was definitely one of their games that they could have won.
I think they deserve this loss, in my opinion.
You think so? Why?
It's the draft, man. Like, okay, look at their comp, right? So they pick an Aphelios, great champ. And it's and they Legacy banned the Ashe, and so they're putting Vital on one of the champions good at. They get the Lee Sin, excellent, great job guys, and they blind the Orianna, excellent, no problems with that. Control Mage, Shock's great with Control Mages. Then the second phase hits, right? So at this point, they're into an Ezreal, Trundle, Victor, and then Leona comes out from after bans for Legacy. And so Direwolves answer with Lulu, then Mordekaiser. And this is the key thing for me, right? Because they were sort of flicking between like a Braum and Lulu, right? So if they go Braum, I'm happy with the Mordekaiser. I'm fine with it. Because you've still got a front line, you can still play comp-centric, right, as a team fight. But as soon as you pick...
The Braum is good into all those champions as well. It plays into their identity, yeah.
But as soon as they lock that Lulu, and I'm okay with the Lulu as well, but as soon as they lock the Lulu, they have 0 frontline. And then you pick Mordekaiser as a pseudo frontline. Like, Lee Sin's not going to be front. Like, what does he do? He either kicks someone away and dies, or just dies. And Mordekaiser's the same way. Like, yes, you ult someone out, but now you're out of the fight too, so there's no frontline. So it means that they just can't play team fights properly ever. And then Legacy, so the thing I sort of want to highlight is they picked Aphelios, Lee Sin, Orianna. So you have to, like, because you got such good picks early, you have to just bite the bullet, take the tank. Because if you take an Ornn there, that's great. Like, that comp sounds fine, You've got Engage now. Like, you can play the team fights in a standard way that's very known. Whereas you look at what Legacy did, they did Ezreal, Trundle, and then the Victor. So they picked whatever their preferred counter to Aphelios. They then pick the Trundle as your setup pick, which provides a semi-front line for you. They pick the Victor, which is their pick into Orianna. And so then with the Leona out of bans, like, they can pick whatever they want. So they were able to go Kayle for free. They could have picked a tank there if they wanted, but I think the Kayle worked great. Mm-hmm. But for me, like, you at the top level of OPL, granted Direwolves aren't quite playing at the top right now, although I would still think they are the best early game team we have. They're just too clean early game, but they need to be punished for, in my opinion, picking a bad composition, and that's just what happened.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't tunnel vision too much on like getting a tank, because like I definitely think the Braum is good, but once you pick the Lulu, the draft is a bit scuffed. Because even if you do pick the Ornn, they do have a Trundle already, so like the single front line is just currently already negated. So you either want to run like double front line into Trundle or no front line. And they decided to run no front line, which I mean worked for most of the game. Like they were quite strong. They moving
got the
around
early
the
lead.
map a bit,
Yes.
like a lot better than Legacy. Like they had them under the balls. It's just they weren't really able to take the balls off, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, because as soon as you got to those team fights, as soon as it was a standard fight where they had to force onto Legacy, they couldn't do it. It never worked. The only fight they actually won was a disjointed fight where it ended up being like Mordekaiser and Aphelios off to one side, and like Legacy's jungler was caught on the other side fighting, and like it was literally Trundle walked away from his front line. Oh, sorry, it was Trundle and Leona walked away and stopped protecting like Ezreal and Victor, and like it was just so weird for the one fight they actually got for free. But yeah, all the other fights just Legacy favored. And Vital got caught. That was a bit disappointing. Like, because Dials were in control, and then like as soon as Vital got caught, the game just like went out the window.
Yeah.
Which was just sad, unfortunately.
I mean, that's what happens when you have Vital.
He is very vital.
Alright. The next game was another Legacy game, which was definitely a more traditional Legacy game that we're used to seeing, where Legacy just ended the auto win streak just like that. Got absolutely shit stomped. And I mean, I wouldn't say a lot about this game as well, because I want to give Auto the benefit of the doubt. Like, even though I think they have, when they do win, it doesn't look like clean and decisive. Like it feels still very messy. And so I think them losing like this is like a good reminder of like, yeah, you're winning a lot, but like this is how you really get punished. Like, because the win streak really started when they beat Legacy, like, and they just started taking a whole new form after just stomping Legacy. And so now they're kind of humbled again, honestly. Even though I think like Isla has been having great performances, Rare has been a lot more consistent. But the draft is also a bit whack as well. Like, it's very. I'm a very, how would I say it? Not a big fan of low damage compositions. So something that really triggers me is seeing stuff like Ash TF. Like, that composition does no damage. You look at Legacy's champs, holy shit, they're just shitting out damage. And if Topu and Isles are like frontline enough that they can just tank the Ashe and the Zoe. Like, how do they do damage? Because they've got Ashe that wants to fight front to back. They want the Zoe to poke. Like, the draft is a bit all over the place where they want to do different things. And I think it's fine to have, like, Ashe or Zoe in isolation. But with, like, Zoe, you want something like Aphelios. You want something like, I don't know, Ezreal. Something that can either make up for it or can poke with it, where you can play a whole poke-centric comp like Varus. But Varus has fallen pretty out of favor. And then you've got, like, if you want to go the Ashe, so the mid lane pick is obviously like an Orianna. Really easily follows up on the Ashe arrow. Something like a Syndra, you know, just has just that one-shot potential, can follow up on the Ashe arrow. You know, I think there are a lot better combinations than Ashe Zoe. It just feels like they're champions that want to do different things and just don't really have good synergy as like a backline composition. Pair that with an Olaf that's behind, an Ornn they can't side lane into Aatrox, and a Rakan into like their whole team. Like, I mean, the Rakan's good, but like it's really hard to execute once your team's behind with that composition, and then Rakan can pretty much do nothing.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan of the Zoe blind pick, as Oriana's still up and available. But
yeah, Oriana's pretty much the better pick.
Harry made me a believer of why they went to Zoe, though. Because he had priority so much of the time. And like he was constantly linking up with the Olaf. But yeah, as you said, unfortunately, Topoon was doing a lot of damage. And he got snowballed pretty hard. Same with Babip. And they just did such a good job like fighting.
Well, they pretty much split the map, and it was pretty hard for them to even retake the vision with Zoe, because Zoe had like a lot of control over top side. But it was the same thing bot lane for Order, but like way worse. Like this Aatrox is fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
And like there was a moment where Ashe, Rakan, and Ornn are like being staunched by the Aatrox, and Ashe autos him, and it does like 50 health. And then it's like, oh shit, like this Aatrox could just ace all three of them by himself. Like,
yeah,
it's so unplayable.
I think this also shows that Legacy's starting to understand their composition and like their identity much better, because we saw that the way they lost is people shut down Topoon, because you can put effort into shutting down Raze and he doesn't get shut down very easily. But because they didn't put resources into Topoon and thus Babbitt played towards him, with him being on a carry, it just made their lives so much easier. And by putting Isles on a tank, their composition is pretty clean, pretty good.
Well, I think this is like a really standard Legacy comp that they know how to execute. None of this like, Topoon on tanks just looks really awkward. The team overall just looks way better when he's on a carry, and Babbitt just always plays the top side. Like, he is just obsessed with top side. So if you want to beat Legacy, you want to be able to beat that duo, which I think was something that Direwolves did in their game. Like they were able to beat Topoon just by solo killing him with the flash Mordekaiser ult, and pretty much just set the pace of the game. And it's like, can do that and shut down Babbitt from Topoon. Like Legacy have a lot harder game, because like Raze and Isles are just their weak side, just play for team fights, like bot lane, and Halo's just Halo.
That's all good.
Well, that's good. On to the next game, which, oh no. Okay, maybe not on to... Do you have anything to say about this game?
Yes. The great thing now is that Chiefs got another good practice match, tested out some picks. They got the Callista and Nautilus working, which was good to see. They tested out the Xing Zhao and also the Jace.
And the Jace.
But yeah, it was a good test game for them, and like they got to try some stuff. I think like the sad part for me was, again, Bard first pick for Gravitas, but they then picked Nidalee, Pralus, good stuff. They then ended up out of bans with only an Ashe ban, picked the Vayne, so that was sort of it for me. I was just like, okay, that's what kind of game this is. But yeah,
Vayne Bard is not a lane, by the way. That is not a combination.
But don't worry, they rounded out with a Poppy, so good times, man, good times.
I mean, Poppy, if you look at isolation, is really good at all their champions. It's just the whole composition just sucks ass, and nobody's not good top lane. But like, I want to take back saying that Gravitas were on a positive trajectory, because this week sucked.
I think this is just Gravitas like accepting their position and having a bit more fun.
Yeah, they've definitely checked out.
All right, what's next?
All right, next game is Mammoth vs Pantanet, and this was a game that Mammoth could have won, but they didn't. Why didn't they, Simon?
Oh, like it was so close. Like, so they had the TF, and they didn't do bad. They turned around mid game and won some skirmishes, which was good. And they got a lead, and they started to do stuff with that lead, which was exciting. But they made the error of assuming that they have to play standard, and they don't, because they've got a TF. They can literally play to like 1-4 split, right? And so what they did was they would push in the waves and then all reset and go to a fucking objective, like a dragon or a baron, and then be like, hey, we're here to fight, guys. It's like, no, keep the TF splitting. Like, let him teleport in when he's needed. And until then, you help to break up what is a pretty massive comp with like a Cassio, a Mundo, although they had the Bard. So I think even if you just got Mundo out of the fight, it just helps so much. Because you don't have that big body to block. Because they had Mammoth had the Ornn, so they had options to go in. And I think for me, I would have just loved to see them split push because they could have. They had the option, but so much of the time,
is, like, yeah,
they would just
going
release
on to
pressure.
that, like, it's such an easy win condition to play through as well. Because if they don't respect the TF, it is so easy to end the game. Like, it's so easy for just on, and I think Ash should have gone TP this game just for that fact. Like, TF can always just start pushing the game when they start contesting for these later dragons. Can literally just TP into their base and just end the game. And be like, alright, you guys can have the dragon, we'll just have the win. You know, them grouping just feels really awkward, and they didn't really have to play towards it. And I think that's like a lot of like GDX first time on stage is probably not going to call, hey, I could split push and end the game. Or maybe he doesn't even know about it, you know? He is a pretty rookie player.
Well, the good news was that they did start to do it, but at that point it was way too late. Because they had let the game go back into PGG's control. And so by the time Twisted Fate had pushed all the way in, they just got so many objectives they could just group and force. The side lane didn't matter as much anymore. So I think for them it's just a good lesson to take away of if they had been splitting from mid game, they could have easily won that. And if they just neutralized the objectives rather than contesting them and trying to fight for them, it would have worked a bit better. But again, like new player on stage, so probably has some nerves, and like they're probably not fully versed on the strategy. So good attempt, but some more effort needed.
Close but no cigar.
Well, they did have the Graves, you know.
I mean, it's kind of sad now because losing this game pretty much just seals your fate for playoffs. It's pretty much just out of their hand now. So it's like, it's really hard to imagine a world where like Mammoth are able to get in, because it pretty much requires like Direwolves and AV like losing all their games and Mammoth winning all of them. So it's pretty much decided, even though they had this really exciting moment where they looked really on top of things, and then they just didn't. I think the Heimerdinger pick, if they could find more creative ways to just win in draft, I think it's like really easy to get a lot of wins for Mammoth. I think they could easily achieve it, but with this GDX switch in and just pretty regular drafting and whatnot, it's pretty doomed for Mammoth. It's just, and I mean, I think that's fine. They've had good performance, all things considered. As long as they didn't come 8, that's a success. But you could still say with this roster they could have achieved more. And like, we'll probably be looking back in the next year, whether or not OPL is around next year, seeing these players perform on better teams, different teams, and seeing them actually able to play the game. Or they might just do a Sam and just choke and fall out of existence and play for Gravitas Academy. Either or. But I do want to shout out to Biopanther. Like, he's been playing really insane. He was a person that I was like really critical of his performance, and he's really stepping up. Rogue still looks really off from anything that isn't Thresh. His Bard wasn't really something that was super impressive, because Bard is also like a super high skill champion that like, if you don't land the stun in a team fight, you've pretty much just done nothing. Like, it's very easy to just do nothing in a fight as Bard and just lose the game. So I don't know if it's the right champion for Rogue, but hey, they won in the end. So what can I say? The last game was definitely the best game of the week, which was AV vs Direwolves. Appy really fucking popping off. And I think this is a culmination of AV being able to win a game and just feeling a bit more confident and just really giving it to the Direwolves that are definitely on the down. I think if there was a time to call an upset win, this was definitely it. And it does bring into questions about where we see Direwolves going into the future, because they are 0-4 and it's pretty much almost a repeat of the spring split. I would not be surprised if Direwolves at this current point are already mental boomed because they have Chippies and Vital on the same team.
I think for like I personally liked the Direwolves draft, and but I think they misused it in terms of strategy, because, and touching on your mental boom point, I think they got a bit panicky after their previous game where they didn't quite have, in my opinion, a good composition, and thus we're like, okay, we'll just go back to standard to get the win. But they misexecuted a lot of the engage attempts, or the attempts to pick someone around neutrals, because they had a good early game, but as soon as the composition, because it's so ulti-centric, as soon as you waste 2 of those ultimates, you're much worse off, particularly against things like a LeBlanc, things like an Italy who can poke you down. I know you were talking about this earlier.
About the draft?
No, yeah, about the 2 different styles.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I was just bringing up the schedule while you were talking.
Yeah.
What were you talking about? You were talking about the draft.
Yeah, I was saying how I like the Direwolves draft, but in terms, it's very ulti-reliant.
Like yeah, well, the point that I was trying to make there, this was what we said before we started the podcast, we were just going through the games, was that Direwolves comp is just too predictable. It's like, this is the kind of composition you'd see like fucking Samsung Galaxy from like 4 years ago and SKT 4 years ago playing. It's really not like, it's not exciting, and it's very predictable, and like in a different age this would have been the perfect composition. But I think in this age you need a bit of chaos, and I think chaos is just great at breaking the ranks. So the current chaos champions that AV have are Nidalee, LeBlanc, and Set. And they're just these really wild card picks that just ruin front to back team fights. Because obviously Set wants to play into front to back. He's one of the best into front to back because he can just ult the big fucking beefy tank into the enemy team, land a massive E and W, and it's all over. Nidalee can just break it by just poking them out, forcing them to back, get bad tempo resets, as well as Nidalee just shits out damage later on. As hard as it is to execute, it is very hard. Take my word for it. It does, it's really hard to also just not die into it if you're Direwolves. And then you've also got the LeBlanc, which is just the perfect Chaos champion, where she's just constantly trying to output damage onto you. And so I'm not that big of a fan of Direwolves comps. I would have been okay with this, as it's a really easy to execute comp, but it just feels like, if I was going into game as AV, it's just okay, we know what these champions want to do in 2 sentences or less. They just want to play front to back, they want to engage with the on ult, and they want to follow up CC or with the Ashe ult, follow up CC with the Ori, block damage with the Braum, and Trundle just ults the tank. And it's just, I don't know, it's just too straightforward for me. It's just too easy to predict, and it's now you're just making it really easy to just counterplay. It's they're engaging. All right, if we just dodge the engage, they've got nothing. And that's what happened.
So, interesting question for you. So, with this loss, do you think Direwolves will double down and say, okay, we just misplayed, we need to practice the strategy more and change up a few of the picks to give it more chaos and a bit more utility in terms of throughout the game being able to make plays? Or do you think they'll avoid standard compositions now because it's close enough to finals, and possibly not make it to finals because of that? And I
think it's hard for Direwolves either way to be in this spot, because they were on the up and up and now they're on Thor, right? I think they can look at this composition and have enough experience to be I feel like the composition wasn't the problem. For them personally, I have doubts of the composition, but I think they personally will look at it and be we can play this well. Maybe just look into bans. Set is really good into front to back. Maybe just ban that, and our front to back becomes a lot easier.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think they'll double down on it. I doubt because it pretty much requires the players to play completely differently. It means that playing side lane with chippies and Shock is playing some whack shit, which he's very predictable with his chance anyway.
I think something they could have done is instead of Ornn out of bans, they could have done the Brom there and then saved counterpick, because then their composition was still functions with the Brom and Trundle as your frontliners, and then Chippy can go for counterpick for top lane and give a bit more of that another win condition of possibly a split pusher or side laner.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. I mean, there's not many other people you're really giving counterpick to, but what does Chippies do outside of Ornn this game?
There's not really.
It's like Chippies isn't the split pusher he used to be.
And it's also not the meta it used to be either.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, well, that's pretty much it for the games. Let's talk about this week's games. This upcoming week. So on Friday, first game, we have Chiefs versus AV. Chiefs coming off from a 2-0. Pretty confident they'll win, although they had a relatively easy week with Gravitas. But I think it's also a good sign of whether, I think AV can really bring it to Chiefs.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine Chiefs will actually lose to AV though.
Yeah, they've currently 2-0 on AV.
Are they? Yeah, that makes sense if they are.
Again, if AV wants to make it to playoffs, this is one of the matches they need to upset to build the wins, because I think they need a win here and they need to beat Direwolves. I don't know if they verse Direwolves again, but yeah, they need to make up the gap essentially.
Yeah,
and they'll need a couple of upsets, but I think Chiefs is still definitely favoured.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Legacy versus Gravitas. Legacy, obviously. Direwolves versus Mammoth. I could actually see Mammoth winning this, honestly, with how Direwolves are currently performing, but it's also hard to call. I think it'll be a good pick you up for Direwolves to win this game, kind of give them a bit more confidence. But if they lose this game, holy shit, is their split over?
I think I would love to see Mammoth throw a curveball. Something that they're comfortable on. The Heimerdinger would be great, but I'm pretty sure it'll be banned. But throw something against Direwolves just to force them into a situation they're uncomfortable in.
Yeah.
But I think Direwolves, still probably going to win.
I would agree with that. Next we've got Order versus Pentanet. I think this is an Order win. I think Pentanet is not the cleaner team out of the two. And even though I would criticize both of these teams for not being super clean, I think Order is definitely the better team at the moment over Pentanet.
Yeah, I think Order's just at another level currently. They're up playing with the big boys currently, and Pentanet's still trying to make their way in, even though they've gotten up in the standings.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Next game in Saturday is Legacy versus Mammoth. This is definitely a Legacy win for me. Can't imagine Mammoth upsetting them again after Legacy had fucked up to give Mammoth the win.
Yeah, I think Legacy will take it.
Direwolves versus Pentanet. This is closer, because I'm also not super sold on Pentanet as a team, but at the same time, Direwolves are playing pretty bad. It also really depends on their match against Mammoth. If they lose, then Direwolves 100% lose to Pentanet, just because there's such tiltable players.
I think they'll win against Pentanet either way, because Direwolves are really clean early game, right? And so if they put Pentanet in a hole, Pentanet don't come out of a hole easily. And so they won't put up as much of a fight as, say, Mammoth would, because Mammoth will just throw stuff until it works. Whereas I think Pentanet will play a bit more standard, and Direwolves will love playing that slower, more methodical gameplay and close it out that way.
I think Pentanet will win against Direwolves.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, because I think you're talking about the curveball to throw Direwolves off. If there's any team that throws a curveball, it's fucking Pentanet. Pentanet doesn't even know what they're going to draft in the day. How do Direwolves know? So I think it's pretty Pentanet favored in my opinion at this current time, considering Direwolves' current trajectory.
Oh yeah.
I think it all really depends on their match prior.
Mm.
AV versus Gravitas. AV favored. Hard to imagine Gravitas doing anything against AV. AV has proven game after game that they are definitely a step above Gravitas and Mammoth.
I just want them to play clean. I don't want it to be a contest.
Yes,
that's what I want from AV.
Agree. And no more first pick bards. And then the last game, which is probably the most exciting one, is Order versus Chiefs. Because Order lost to Legacy, so it's in a pretty convincing fashion. So it's pretty easy to say that Legacy are back to their current form. Obviously, Legacy still has holes in their gameplay, but I think that's just Legacy as a whole at this current time. But I'd still say Legacy is the best team. And then currently going for second place would be these two teams, Chiefs and Order. And Chiefs, they're really inconsistent. They either go like 2-0 or 0-2 in most of their weeks. Like, it feels like, at least. Like, even in the weeks they go like 1-1, it feels like they went 0-2. Like, so who do you think is actually going to win? Because I can't really choose one off the outset. I'm more leaning towards Order, but I still think that like it's like a 55-45.
Yeah, like Order should have it if they've learnt their lessons. But that's the problem. Order doesn't always seem to learn their lessons. Whereas Chiefs, it's far more dependent on like the draft that they get. So, for example, like the drafts we saw this week were really clean. Previous week, not so clean. And so I think Chiefs will win it, assuming Order try to play standard. I think Chiefs will be able to play into that quite cleanly. And for me, it's like Rare and Ayla, can they punish Katsuri Draku? And if they can't do that, I think Chiefs will take it.
I think it's definitely Order favored, but it all really depends on what happens in the bot lane. That's going to be it. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the OST. Glad to have you along. Thank you for all the support. I've been joined here with Simon. Thank you again for coming on,
man.
Talking about the OPL and whatnot. And we'll see you all next time. Peace.